Hey besties, welcome back to season 2 of the Millennial Reset podcast. If you're new here, thank you for being here and welcome to your millennial mental health safe space. I'm your host, Peter Goose, former teacher turned burnt out corporate millennial, and after immersing myself in the science of the brain, body, and mind, I took what I learned and I applied it to my own healing journey, which brings me here to today, where it's my new mission to share this far and wide to impact the millions of other millennials that are all feeling this same chronic burnout to help us heal and get back to living for us. So I don't know if y'all remember this or feel the same way, but remember that period of time in like the early 2000s where a lot of us were graduating high school or college and we all had that one person we knew that worked at the early days of like Facebook or Google or Amazon, and there was something exhilarating about it, right? A fancy, good paying corporate job in a Silicon Valley office building where there was free snacks and a company happy hour every Friday. And at the time, it sounded pretty dreamy, right? And at least for me, that became the new goalpost. Work for one of those really big tech giants, and then I'll really be able to say I made it. And the big corporations, they were in love with us because we grew up learning technology. So we kind of just had a knack for it, at least more so than their boomer previous employees. So it was a win-win. The corporations got really efficient and effective workers, and we got a handsome paycheck out of it, plus a stocked office kitchen. Who doesn't want that? And for a while there, it worked out in everyone's favor. They were happy with us. We were happy with them. But what we were naive to at the time was the invisible message written in that contract that was slowly playing out in front of us that says something like, you agree to be our workhorse, and since we're reimbursing your cell phone bill and giving you a free laptop, you're expected to answer our calls and emails and always be on. And don't complain, because just like that big poster says in the meeting room, there's no I in team. And, they also said we're a family. We're all part of the same mission and vision here, right? And so we bought into it. But not just at those big tech giants, because the word spread quickly that we were a new generation entering the workforce that had the drive and the skills to help them meet their lofty goals and KPIs and become another extremely rich corporation. And this is where hustle culture really took off, because there was a prize to be had in this rat race. Or at least that's what our perception was at the time. We thought that we would get a piece of the pie at the end of the day. And so we ran faster on the human hamster wheel. And we started competing against each other to see who was the most stressed. Stress became this, sort of honor badge where we would seek out validation and approval from our managers and each other for being the one who worked the longest hours, or, being the first one to exceed your goal. And those company-sponsored Friday happy hours became a celebration of who was the most stressed out that week. And, this subconscious belief that we've always had, even from when our parents told us that rest is lazy, got reinforced. That our level of productivity has a direct correlation to our level of worth. And so we basically sold our souls to a mission and a goal that wasn't even ours. The job title became our identity. So when you meet somebody new, the first thing you talk about isn't what you're passionate about or your hobbies or your family. It's your job title and what you do for work. Makes sense, right? And all of this for one main reason, because we thought that they would return the favor. until they didn't. And I realized this myself when a very large company that I used to work for, I won't name any names, decided to lay off about 90% of the org that I was under at the time, and were in such a rush to do so that they let customers know the same day that they let the employees know. And of course by email too, right? And so there I am driving to the airport after a customer visit, and that same customer calls me after being with them all day in complete shock and, wondering if I was okay. So in my, complete disbelief, I pull off into a parking lot to check my email, and sure enough, there it was. The official email letting us know that this was such a tough decision, and they were so appreciative of everything we did. Yeah, like so appreciative that they couldn't even get on the phone and let us know individually like a normal human being with any sense of compassion or empathy. And just like that, everything you gave to this quote unquote work family was all for nothing. You were just a number and disposable at any time. And, the really sad thing about all this is that it's not just me. We've almost kind of become accustomed to layoffs, or at least living in the fear of always expecting it, right? But I think the good news in this story is that it allows us to wake up to the truth of it all, where you really begin to actually realize that, not all. There's some that are good, right? But to a lot of companies, you are nothing more than a number, a contributor to a KPI and quarterly objective. And you start to question, is the reward of all of this hard work really worth it when they can just throw it all out the window in an instant? And, yeah, sure, maybe you're making six figures, which would have been really exciting about 10 years ago. But nowadays, as you know, it seems like whenever we're finally saving up and getting ahead, the next recession or, pandemic or unprecedented historical event hits to knock you right back down, right? What Chumbawamba said it best. I get knocked down, but I get up again. But anyways, I'm confident that there's a silver lining in all this, because even though we didn't create hustle culture, we certainly enabled it to the next level, consciously or unconsciously. And the beauty of being able to see your part in it all also allows you to more clearly recognize the power that you hold and your part to reverse it and creating something new, solution. And as uncomfortable and painful as it might be to realize that, yes, we allowed this to happen and get to where it is now, again, whether it was consciously or unconsciously, that's the first step in solving it. But then what, right? How do we actually create the change that we're so hungry for? And first of all, 32 work week or 32-hour work week, am I right? Get involved with your local politicians and make sure they know that that's what we actually want them working towards, and not banning TikTok or some other bullshit that doesn't actually make a real difference in our lives. But then I think there's a couple other things that are super important and powerful that we can all contribute towards individually and collectively. So number one, we got to stop the stigma. A couple years ago, especially after return to work after the pandemic and quarantine, this whole quiet quitting concept really started emerging and getting popular. And I guess it still is. And yeah, sure, it's an easy way to put a label on the behavior of a lot of the younger generations like millennials and Gen Z that are literally tired of being a workhorse. But when we start enabling that type of rhetoric, we further reinforce this perception that we're all just lazy and tired and don't want to work. They want us to keep using the term quiet quitting. because it fits hustle culture's narrative. And, when I say hustle culture, I'm talking about, again, like the big corporations, the ones that are actually creating this state of the workplace. It gives them the ability to continue labeling us as lazy. And they want to guilt and shame us into working harder. So instead of identifying with quiet quitting, just start acting like what it really is. If you're not getting what you expected from all the work you're putting in, then why put in all the extra effort? You don't have to tell anybody that you're not, just do it. Okay. And this whole idea of like extra effort, right? It used to have a reward because so many people were paid by the hour and got overtime. But if you're not getting any sort of guaranteed reward from going above and beyond at your salaried job, then what's the payoff? And, let me be clear. I'm not saying don't do your job. Like, do your job and do it well. But if you don't feel like you're being compensated for your worth, then don't sign up for the extra project. Set the boundary that you are so scared to set because you think it's going to get you fired. That is a perfect example of the mindset that they want to keep everyone stuck in. But you have a life. You have a life to live that's been put on hold for the past few decades while you've dedicated yourself to work and getting ahead. And if that hasn't worked, then maybe it's time to explore another way of doing things. And that starts with not enabling this stigma around actually having more work-life balance. And number 2, this was a tough one for me. Find what lights you up outside of work. Because without hobbies and passions, then the only thing you ever think about is work. This was me 100% to a T before I hit reset. When I met someone new, right, the first topic of conversation was about what I did and who I worked for. Nowadays, I don't think twice about calling out my friends when they start talking about work stuff outside of work. But this whole idea of, finding hobbies and passions, it's not as easy as it may sound. Because, and I promise you, it's not just you. I think as millennials, we all jumped into the rat race at such a young age. And we've just been spinning on this, hamster wheel of work, work, work the past few decades. And, don't get me wrong, too. There's been certain times during recessions and the like where we kind of had to work harder than everyone else to avoid being the next one to get laid off. But this mindset also meant that we slowly gave up on hobbies. We stopped doing what actually brought us joy because we had to prioritize survival and safety for so long that maybe if you were like me, you've forgotten what you even like to do. And I think this is another big reason why so many millennials have that like nostalgia for quarantine because, even though the pandemic sucked, it meant that we finally got to just spend more time alone. And when we were all just sitting inside for a couple months, we started baking bread and doing puzzles and exploring an old hobby that you forgot about, or maybe picking up brand new hobbies. But then when we were called back to the office, it meant that we no longer had that extra time spent, doing things that we enjoyed. And again, like this is where those boundaries come into play. Just imagine a day where it's completely normal for you to go on a, 2-hour hike in the middle of the workday. You still get your job done. But when enough people start demanding that flexibility and confidently communicating those boundaries, I really think that's how we're going to change this, structure of society. Maybe it's not that we actually make any more money, but at least we have more time. And, as far as I'm concerned, time is the new money. And look, I am incredibly fortunate, y'all, now to work for a company that truly does value work-life balance for employees. So it's proof that we're moving in the right direction. But I am also fully aware that there's still plenty of organizations run by people that still think that if you are not working 8 to 5 every day and available whenever, then you're not a good employee. The narrative is outdated, it's irrelevant, and quite frankly, toxic. But the only way that's going to change is if we do our part first by not further enabling that stigma and finding out what are those things that create your identity outside the job title, so that when you do have that extra time outside of work, you have something to fill that time besides more work thoughts. And number 3, find your ikigai. Because when you set the boundaries to have more time to live your life, you're probably going to find that, I'll be darned, I do have other interests. I do have passions. And this whole idea, this next step of ikigai, is not for everybody. But you might find that you can even monetize your passion and start creating a side hustle that allows you to feel more financially comfortable, so that those fears that cause you to overwork yourself don't end up ruling your life. So this is where this kind of ancient Japanese concept of ikigai comes into play. It translates to your reason for being. This iki means life, and then gai means value or worth. So it's essentially your life purpose, what you get out of bed for. And you can think about it like a 4-circle Venn diagram, with each bubble representing these 4 different questions. Number 1, what do you love? Number 2, what you're good at. Number 3, what the world needs more of. And number 4, what you can be paid for. And in the center of all 4 of these is your ikigai. So think about it like this. When you were younger, you had passions, you had dreams, and then one day someone told you, you can't do that. That's not going to make you any money. But that was back then when we were kids. The possibilities of the internet and things like online income were not part of our reality. But things have changed, drastically, to the point where you've got Gen Z over here making millions of dollars posting pictures of their feet online. And no shame, Gen Z, do you. I'm slightly envious. So if that's possible, then who's to say that it's not possible for you to create a side hustle out of your passions? You like working out? Create an online course or an online membership. You like creating art? Start selling it on Etsy. Chances are it's not going to make you a millionaire, but heck, if it pays for your groceries, then why not at least try? But it's that same subconscious mindset that we were raised with, that you can't make money from doing what you love, that's not only no longer true, but it's the thing that's keeping you from even trying. And, it's not the only option, obviously, to create more financial freedom. But if you find that you love doing something anyways, why not teach yourself and start small and make a little side hustle out of it? But we tend, as human beings, right? We think so much about the worst case scenario. Like, what if I fail? We don't consider the best case scenario. Like, what if it becomes the thing that allows you to feel more financially safe, while also, added bonus, rediscovering yourself in the process? So again, number 1, stop the stigma. Number 2, find what lights you up. And number 3, if you're ready for that extra step, make your passion something that brings you profit. Society wants to do everything in its power to keep you in your lane, working to achieve someone else's goal. But as we've seen from the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, this shift is truly starting to happen. You might not see it obviously, because it's this quiet individual change that's happening one person at a time. But as more individuals begin to shift the way that we live our lives, it slowly becomes not only more accepted, but maybe eventually the new norm. Hustle culture will only live on as long as we enable it to continue. So that's my invitation to you, besties. Don't worry right now about finding your purpose or starting something new from scratch. Start small. Again, test the fear that lives in the back of your mind that if you don't give every ounce of you to the job, then you'll risk failing and falling and losing it all. Test it out in small ways. Shut down the laptop 10 minutes early. Delay sending the email that you'd normally respond to in 0.5 seconds and schedule it for 15 minutes. Start training yourself and others that have grown accustomed to expect a certain behavior from you slowly over time without guilting and shaming yourself. And standing strong in your boundaries because you're doing it for the reward. The reward of getting your life back. And if you are looking for a little bit more guidance on this, whole concept of hitting reset and reprioritizing your life, be sure to check out the Millennial Mindset Makeover, the 30-day online program. It's my little baby passion project of love. You can find it on the website, www.themillennialreset.com. And if this whole Ikigai stuff piqued your interest, there's also a free bonus course in there called Creating Your Own Profitable Passion. But if nothing else, just remember that you are worth so much more than a cog on a wheel. And you deserve to remember what it feels like to have an identity outside of work. So now go get out there and go do something for you today. And last but not least, besties, don't forget to share this episode with somebody that needs to hear this message, one of your millennial besties. And I will see you next time on the next episode of the Millennial Reset.